the number system to prepare for this question, right? So without wasting your time, let's go to the first question. Put ticks in the relevant boxes to show that types, or to show what types of numbers each is. So you have your set of natural, integers, real, rational, irrational, and undefined. There's only one thing missing: whole numbers. So we'll then look at the first question, the first one that is given. 4 pi over pi. How would you solve this? This can be solved very easily by starting off with dividing. So you need to work out the whole thing, the fraction, to remain with a number, which is either going to be natural, integer. So how do you work it out? This is easy. I'm not even going to rewrite it. So 4 pi divided by pi is the same as this, cancels that, right? So you have your 4. 4 is a natural number. It's also an integer. It's also a real number. It's also a rational number. However, it is not an irrational number or undefined. So we are done with the first one. Now for the second one, it's very tricky. It's cubed root of -8. Now you need to also do the same thing. You need to work this out. How do you work it out? You firstly have to remove the cubed root. How do you do that? You can do that by starting off by removing the cubed root, putting brackets. This is how you remove the cubed root. 1 over 3, right? So what's inside the root there? It's actually -8, which is the same as what? -2 to the power of 3, right? So once it's at this point, it's the same as -2, because 3 times 1 is 3. 3 times the 1 that is down here, it's 3. 3 divided by 3 is 1. So you then remain with -2. Therefore, -2 is not a natural number. It's, however, an integer. It's a real number. It's a rational number. It's not an irrational number, and it's not undefined. So you are done with that part. Now for this 7 over 3, the third one, also you should note that when you divide 7 by 3, you get 2. There's a remainder, which is 1. Now that 1, if you put it in your calculator, you put the fraction in your calculator, you'll get something like 2,11111. Now that shows you that there is basically decimals. However, those decimals, they are in a form that is can be turned into a fraction. We therefore know that if that's the case, it is a rational number. It's therefore not irrational. It's therefore not undefined. It's also a real number. However, it can be an integer and it can be a natural number. So we'll move on to the next question, which is this -5 over 2 times 0. Now, the denominator, 2 times naught. 2 times naught is naught. And any number divided by naught is undefined in mathematics. Remember that. So, undefined. Therefore, it can't be any of these if it's undefined, right? So we can then move on to the next part of the question, which is also very tricky. However, remember, you have the square root here, where there's a fraction inside, 1 over 2 over 3. So this can be simplified into by removing the fraction and putting it as 2 to the power of 3. Remember, when you make it a fraction, that's when you will then turn the exponent into a negative sign. And this is the same as when you open your brackets, 2 to the power of 1 over 2 here. Remember, it's the square root, 1 over 2. And therefore, this is still to the power of 3. And it will make it an irrational number, because if you insert this into a calculator, you'll find that the decimals are not in ordered pairs. They're just all over the place. So it's just an irrational number. Therefore, it's a real number. However, it's not undefined. It's not rational, it's not an integer, and it's not a natural number. Now we'll move on to the next set of the question. Question 1 done, 5 marks received. Let's move on to the next part. Again, complete the following table by placing a tick in the appropriate column. So you have now your natural numbers, integer, rational numbers, and irrational and real numbers. Now for this one here, I would also like to add something. All these numbers or the number system, they have symbols. So you also need to familiarize yourself with the symbols so that in your exam, when they have put the symbols, you know which number they are talking about, or which number system, natural, whole, integer, rational or irrational, and so forth. So you should note that there are symbols which, instead of writing the words, they can put. So this time they are starting off with a 3, which we do know very well it's a real number. We therefore are going to tick. This is a real number. It's also an integer. It's also a rational number. So therefore it cannot be irrational. It's also a real number. So we're done with that. Now we will move on to the next one, which is 2.2. The square root of 25. If you put it in your calculator, it's 5. And 5 is a natural number. It's also an integer. It's also a rational number. Therefore, it cannot be irrational. It's a real number indeed. So you then have your next part, which is 22 over 7. How many times does 22 go into, how many times does 7 go into 22 rather? So it goes in 3 times and then there's 1 remaining. Again, there is some sort of like a decimal. However, the decimal is basically in a form that can be rewritten as a fraction. So this is a natural, it's not a natural number. Natural numbers don't have decimals. And then it's not an integer again. It's a rational number. It cannot be an irrational number because it's a rational number. It's a real number too. So now we'll look at 2.4, where you have your 3,12 with dots on the top, which shows you that this carries on to infinity. However, this also indicates that this is a rational number because there are ordered pairs there, even if it continues. So it's a rational number. It cannot be a natural number. It cannot be an integer. And then when it comes to being irrational, it's already rational. Therefore, it cannot be irrational. Now, with real, it's always real. Now, let's look at this next question, which is 2,315. Now, again, this is not a natural number. It's not an integer. It's not a rational number as well because there's no order in the decimals. Now, right now, I'm going to then have to tick that it's an irrational number. It's also a real number. It's not an irrational number. It's not a rational number though. So this is what you have. So basically, right now what you have is your question 1 and 2. 5 marks each. You have started on a high note. Remember, this is a competition. I will come up with a very trick question for you in the competition. This is just to practice. Thank you for watching again.